He's still sleeping, so I'm sitting out here trying to do this nice and peacefully. Yesterday I spent 4 hours driving south from Seattle to Portland to McMinnville, which is a town I went to college in. And so for 4 hours I was in this sort of reminiscent, thoughts, feelings, going back to campus. It's been 40 years since I was a freshman there. And I went down there for a memorial for my professor, my academic advisor, mentor, friend. I met Vince Jacobs my freshman year as my academic advisor, and this was a man who was a profound academic historian, spoke French and Chinese fluently, studied European history, was a master at finding intelligence in the classroom, finding brains and bringing them to the surface. What I loved about my relationship with Vince is that he was able to introduce me to this magnificent quantum brain of mine. I came to college with a lot of skills, life skills, not a lot of academic skills, and he was able to harness that and sort of show me how to point this brain, where to go, how to open it up, how to bring it into focus. So I thought today we would talk about the difference between academics and learning, because they're really different. So I've got, my little definitions here, as usual. Academics is usually used in reference to college, university setting, facility of higher learning. It is going to be focused on humanities, on mathematics, on sciences. The main focus is always going to be theoretical. How do we start to harness and discover and break through new territory, new understandings? And when we step into academia, we are there to learn, but we are there to expand. We are there to focus. We are there to harness skill sets and take them forward. It's not a vocational training center. I think that's the most important thing to learn. We're not going to college to learn how to do life skills. What we are doing is we're going to college to find out what our brain knows how to do. That's really important to know. It's a scholarly, academic environment. So learning, on the other hand, is the acquisition of knowledge or skills through experience, study, being taught, gathering information, knowledge, enlightenment, or illumination. It's the process of taking pre-existing skill sets and moving them forward and looking at behaviors and skills and values and preferences. I'm going to say that learning is something that we start from the time that we're born, when we observe, and we scan, and we record, and we play it back, and we learn how to walk, we learn how to run, we learn how to eat, we learn how to pick up our toys, we learn how to do all of these things, right? And learning is sequential. We start and then we begin to expand, and we expand into more independence. What happens, what is hopeful that can happen, is that by the time we get to 9, 10, 11, we know how to do things like moderate chores around the house. We know how to help. We know how to earn some money here and there, babysitting, doing chores, volunteering for neighbors' work, whatever. And then as we get into our 15, 16, 17, this is mostly about honing those skills, because we want to be able to pay for things. We want to be able to go places. We want to be able to do things. These are all learning skills that are setting us up for life in independence. So what happens when these learning skills that are so essential to happen are shut down, and we start to take our kids and our lives and we only harness them towards pure academics? Do you see where I'm going? If we start in middle school with our children, and we start to focus on grades for high school, we've got to get those skills up, because in high school your GPA matters. Because your GPA matters and your SAT and your ACT matters because you got to get into the right college. And then we're going to apply to a lot of different colleges. And then hopefully once we get you to that college, then you have to get those grades up so that you can get that job. And so it ends up becoming a very narrow funnel of performance. And when we start emphasizing academics in the teenage years, and we start funneling someone directly towards only the higher levels of learning in college environments and universities, what we do is we stop allowing them to learn what life skills and what creativity and what other things might be available. Does that make sense? In other words, I can't even tell you how many parents I know who don't want their kids to work. They want them to focus on grades or sports. They're hoping that they can either go somewhere in their sports or go somewhere in their grades. And then they go, don't worry about getting a job. Don't worry about, I have housekeepers. I'm not going to worry about taking care of the house. You just focus on grades. And so what we do is we take this intellect, this brain, and we say that this is all that matters, not the rest of us, and how we move throughout the world, and how we learn how to do relationship, how we do collaboration with others, how we lead, how we manage ourselves in our life and our money and our clothes and the things that matter to us, how we explore preferences, how we explore new options and wonder, what is it I really want to learn? And then once we have this skill set, how do we take this magnificent brain and then put it towards that? So the invitation today is to look at which one are we emphasizing first, and what are the options for academics. So if we emphasize learning, long-term learning, then what we have is a balanced human being. If we emphasize academics only, we forget about the balance. I wanted to introduce you to this book. It's backwards on the screen because it's on Facebook, but How to Raise an Adult by Julie Lythcott-Haims. She wrote this book in 2015. She's phenomenal. Former freshman dean at Stanford University, and she talks a lot about what she saw in the freshman class over and over and over again coming into Stanford. What she saw were parents who had been working so hard to help their kids get to school that they didn't know how to back off. They were texting, don't forget you have to do this homework assignment, don't forget you, and they're online looking at the syllabuses and reminding their kids how to go through college. Probably been doing this the whole time through high school. Getting online, knowing what the assignments are. Did you do this? What was your grade on that? Can you redo this? And what happens as parents when we walk our children's path for them, we live their life for them, we are doing two things. We are definitely interfering and keeping them from discovery of their self in the process. The other part is we're letting them know that they can't do it, that we don't think that they're capable. So we're hyper managing, we're helicoptering, we're hyper focusing, we're helping, right? I think Julie calls it the concierge parent. What do you want? Let me get that for you, because all I need you to do is get good grades. If we focus continually on academics, what happens is we get a really good brain, maybe that can perform, compete, but has no idea how to get a job. So we have 22-year-olds that turn into 23-year-olds and 24-year-olds that don't have a sense of how to reproduce the lifestyle that they want for themselves. And they become dependent, as they always were in high school and college, on their parents. It's a really vicious trap. So the other part that she says in here, and I thought this was wonderful, she uses the example of a mom who calls her mother, and she says, and talking, and the grandmother is like, so what are you doing? She goes, I'm standing out in the middle of a soccer field and it's cold and muddy. And the grandmother, or her mother, was like, what are you doing there? I didn't go to all of your events. If you want to teach your kid about sports and responsibility and athletics, why don't you go for a run? Why don't you go show her what you're doing, rather than staying and focusing, putting all of your attention on this kiddo and not enough attention on yourself? So when we are looking at learning, what we want to do is we want to model learning as adults. What does it look like when I learn how to get a different kind of job? How do I transition? How do I address nutrition differently? How do I explore what interests I have? How do I change it up? How do I show my kids how I go through the process of shifting? That's not that academic intellect that we're talking about. That's that life skills learning tool. So for today, understand the difference between academics and lifelong learning and life skills and what learning is about. And then model, introduce, teach this learning process consistently throughout all of your life as you're modeling it, because only during the time when your kids are in middle school, high school, and college do you have something to do. After that, how do you start withdrawing, and how do you find out what really matters to you, and how do you let your kiddo find out what really matters to them? These are the kind of things I do. I pry parents and kids apart and give you some tools on what you can do with that. If you want, you can give me a call. We can sit down and have a cup of tea and talk about it and maybe explore some coaching. You can find me on DeniseDrydenCoaching.com and have a wonderful Sunday. You take care. Bye-bye.